hear a very iconic voice line there. I think we're going to be
do.
seeing some Scoia'tael coming into this match. We're going to see what's going to be. I mean, what's prepared for us, really.
Absolutely. Scoia'tael, here it is. There is the Ethne deck showing the beer. Everybody knows what that means it's going to be. It is going to be Ale-a-tail, as some people call it, Speller Ale, or whatever you want to say. It's certainly the first time we've seen it this series, actually, at this tournament. I'm pretty excited. Pretty excited to see how it does.
Yeah, Spelltail used to do really well a few patches ago. I think when it was first created, it did really well. Maybe it was part of the surprise factor as well. It gets easily countered by cards like Scorch, for example, in round 3, so it's a bit iffy for tournaments, but we see TailBot deciding to bring it and see what he can do with it.
Yeah, what sort of matchup do you give it here against Radovid deck?
I mean, we're going to have to see if Radovid really has the big counters. I mean, Radovid also obviously works on Farseers, but in this version of the deck, there are no Farseers, so that makes Radovid maybe a bit less of a counter as well.
And what an absolute classic Speller-tail opening, going for the dry pass, saying, you know what, this whole going first thing, I'm not really into it, I'm just going to go into round 2 instead.
This is one of the best ways to counter this coin flip. Obviously, TailBot is going to be going second in the next game, and in this game, he has to go first, and just the way the coin flip went. And in the end, he decides, I'm just going to pass and go, let irohabit really just, dictate the pace of the game and let him really control round 3. Because I guess Spelltail doesn't really care too much if it's a short round 3 or if it's a long round 3 most of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Speller-tail's got great answers to both a short and a long round 3. Short, of course, you're going to see those very powerful Dolbothander Protectors come out after they've been charged up with all those spells. And a long round 3, you'll still see them come out, but at the end, having been played after a bunch of control. So Speller-tail is really a deck that just has a wonderfully strong sort of 2-round game, which is why you see the dry pass. Now, it may look unusual to some of you perhaps less familiar with the game, but it's a very standard opening for this style of deck.
And we just want to get rid of Quen here. I think TailBot does not want that in hand. He does have the Royal Decree for the Ithling, so he can pull that Quen off immediately and get that, on the Protectors, obviously, it's definitely a target you want to hit, and then maybe the Elven Mercenaries or the Sages, depending on the strategy. But definitely want Quen out of your hand, be able to pull it from that Ithling, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to be a little bit careful because, of course, it is a slightly lower tempo play, but you've got answers like Yorvith and whatnot there to really help you deal with that. Although, this is going to get very interesting very quickly because we have Trollolol coming down, who, of course, is a big old snowball card, likes to gain more and more armor as the round goes on, and then, of course, that converts into tempo. But looking at TailBot's build, he doesn't actually run a Scorch. Like, that's a fantastic card against Northern Realms.
I think he'd want to use maybe Artifact Compression here and just get rid of that Troll altogether. It can't get res by Shawnee either in round 3, so it's it's doubly effective, I think. In the end, he might just try and wait a bit, and maybe irohabit decides that it's not a threat immediately, and he's going to let that armor stack up a bit more, and then use the Artifact Compression. So there's no real rush, I think, here for TailBot.
I really like this this opening to the round by TailBot. I like operating a Dolbothander Protector. Very, very good read. I mean, even though, of course, Northern Realms like to play its tactics cards, you actually see all 3 of them in irohabit's hand there. Speller-tail is going to play a lot more spells, right? You're going to get that Dolbothander Protector to have way more value than the operated one because Northern Realms is typically a very unit-heavy composition.
Exactly, and playing the operator before the Artifact Compression makes it so that 4th Protector is also getting buffed, which is obviously, it seems like a small read, like it doesn't matter too much, but those points in the end will matter a lot, I think.
Yeah, I actually find the lineup of special cards that this variation runs very interesting. Less control than you may traditionally imagine. In fact, just the Owl's Thunder and the Artifact Compression are really leaning towards the control side of things. But this is, strangely enough, a tempo Spellscoia'tael deck. You're going to see beer, and you're going to see lots of it.
Yeah, we're seeing Yorvith being hovered here, and it's going to be a big enough point swing where TailBot gets ahead again, which is something I think he was really going for here, because he could have just used the Thunder to take out that Blue Stripe Scout, but in the end he does use the Yorvith. It's obviously a bigger point swing. Loses some points, I think, in total value, because we could hit for 7 there, but in the end it's pretty much the same thing, I think, as the Thunder.
Yeah, he also gets to play it before he plays Elven Mercenaries and whatnot, so the value is kind of shifted from the damage to the hand buff. Elven Mercenary would make sense in the back row to complete the lineup to play beer. But honestly, irohabit's doing pretty well in terms of tempo himself. And like you mentioned, I'm actually surprised we didn't see the Artifact Compression come down just to stifle that Troll. He actually can't do it now because it wouldn't be enough to give him the pass. Yeah,
it's interesting. I mean, we were expecting it much earlier just to get rid of that armor and not, allow any chance for irohabit to really get that Dumbana Heavy Cavalry out. But in the end, he's really waiting it out here. Maybe he's hovering it now. Maybe it's a good time to use it now, although he won't get that pass, like you said.
Yeah, it's an interesting time to use it now. You are 2 cards up, and even on even cards, Speller-tail is a great deck to be playing. So we are going to see that. This does encourage the pass from irohabit. He does have the ability to even out the cards, but it's really, a case against Spellscoia'tael, you're often so focused upon bleeding them that I wouldn't be surprised to see him play into this round at all.
Yeah, we don't really see a big punish, I think, from irohabit's deck towards these very big units like the protectors. There really isn't anything that can really deal with them outright. We see muzzle, but obviously a muzzle, I think TailBot will play around that. It's a card that's been played all day long. I think he knows it's a card that's really in the meta right now, and he'll play around that. There really isn't any kind of Scorch or Igni or really anything can deal with these very big protectors in round 3.
Yeah, absolutely. Which actually, lends towards the case of course, it's very early in the game to be discussing any such thing, but one of the most traditional ways of dealing with spell Scoia'tael Northern Realms is actually to just go for immense pressure second round if they go for the dry pass, which can often just see you win the game, because you essentially go into a one-round game, and quite often, points for points in Northern Realms, your cards win out because of things like Temerian Infantry, John Natalis, Dijkstra. You've got a bunch of really high-tempo cards here, so I actually expect to see irohabit take this round to breaking point and potentially even just take it.
The only problem is that he has a dead John Natalis in hand. We saw all 3 tactics cards in hand, and that means that if he does want to use all those cards and maybe save the John Natalis to mulligan it, it'll mean that it'll be a dead card that you can draw later on with Dijkstra, for example. So it's really risky. I think in the end he just has to try and bleed out some protectors, maybe some key cards from TailBot here, and then try and go into a short round 3 with, for example, Dijkstra, John Natalis, and Horn. A big point swing maybe.
And so here we see the first play of the hallmark of this deck, the Mahakamail coming out of the Elven Mercenary, which is somewhat of a contradiction, but this is the hallmark of this deck, and this is why it does so well. Essentially, you don't have to let your protectors get bled out, because the Mahakamail, boosting a random ally on each row by 4, basically substitutes their tempo. It's like, I need round 2 tempo, don't want to spend my protectors, but I want to buff them while gaining tempo, and the Ale is a fantastic answer for that.
Similar to Horn, it's really dangerous to use though, because if you do spam many of them like we do see here with Sage, it's really the tactic. If your opponent does have a Scorch or an Igni, it just gives even more value to those cards. Luckily for TailBot, there really isn't a direct counter from irohabit, so I think he'll go unpunished in this round, and he'll be able to get a lot of value from the Mahakamail and obviously the Protector synergy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. He is kind of fortunate in the fact that there aren't the big counters sitting there, the amount of Villain Tread and Mirth hits we've seen today. That's pretty efficient against a beer spamming spell Scoia'tael deck, but luckily for TailBot, it looks like he is going to manage to keep up in tempo, or at least attempt to keep up as the Temerians come storing out.
We do see the Radovid not going to be, getting great targets. Normally, when I hit Farseers, I think irohabit is slowly noticing there aren't really Farseers in TailBot's deck, because you normally want to play them early on to get that spell synergy and really get buffed up throughout a long round. But in this case, of course, there are no Farseers on the board yet. I think irohabit can, make a pretty good guess that there aren't any Farseers in TailBot's deck.
Yeah, one of the things that irohabit definitely has in his favor here as well is the Alzur's Thunder sitting in TailBot's hand. Typically, you'd use that to remove an engine card. You may kill an Imperial Enforcer or an Imperial Brigade, or, like a Warlong ship if anybody played those before, it does its damage. However, there's no real singular targets in Northern Realms, right? I mean, you've already compressed the Troll a lot. Other than that, everything is just like high points muster and potentially has armor as well. So that Alzur's isn't going to really find a high priority target, and we could just see it getting traded for 6 or 7 points.
Yeah, especially in the Radovid list, where in Hensel you can get you can steal those Hensel targets like Ballista, like the battering rams, especially the siege supports. I think that can really get a lot of value from buffing other units. But in this case, this Radovid list is a list that really focuses on consistency and doesn't really have those bronze units that are, like you said, engine units for round 1 or round 2, but the really long rounds in general.
Yeah, absolutely, and the Double-Handed Protector is a great card, very, very powerful round 3 finisher, but playing spell Scoia'tael is all about protecting your resources when it comes to these guys, which is why irohabit is happy to play the one that he got operated just as a delaying action, because essentially, he's, that's a maximum 6 value. If he played Commander's Horn and Reinforcement, and I don't actually even know if Reinforcement's a spell, I think it may be an action, so I don't even know if that buffs it. However, there we go. It's not going to get any value, so he plays it just as a delaying action, whereas for TailBot, those Double-Handed Protectors are resources that must be protected into round 3.
Exactly. The best operator targets are targets that really help you out. They give you a key unit for your strategy and your game plan and your win condition, but don't do anything for the opponent, especially like in this cross-faction operators. It makes it so that this protector obviously is a 3 strength bronze unit is not ideal in the slightest, I think. Similar to cards like maybe Necker or even the agitators that we saw in other series.
Yeah, Sage is one of the really core cards in this deck, and actually an interesting inclusion, not typically found in the slightly older spell Scoia'tael variants. What Sage does is allows you to resurrect a bronze alchemy or spell card from your graveyard and then banish it. So essentially, every time you buy a pint in this spell Scoia'tael deck, you get 2 pints because you get to play it, then you get to play a Sage, pick it up again, and neck it again. So really, really great card in this deck.
We are expecting to see Ithlinne fairly soon. We do have the Royal Decree here in hand, which can pull it out. Although there really aren't great Quen targets because you already lost some value from playing that first Sage on the board already. So you can go to Quen the Protectors and those Sages that are left in the deck. But again, you lose some value already. I think TailBot's going to go for this, knowing that if he does it in round 3, he's going to lose a lot of points, or he can just go for the Ignite here and just go for full point value.
Yeah, there's
and
a
not play
Commander's
the Quen
Horn
at
to
all.
steal, right? There we go. The Commander's Horn goes down. Only a 12-point Commander's Horn, but added to the 11 points of a Glace due to the 2-point boost given by Royal Decree. That is still a 23-point play and puts him ahead pretty nicely.
Yeah, but it's odd that we saw it so early, though. I think he could have waited a lot longer with that, especially without there being, maybe cards like an Aneki, for example, shuffling them back.
Well, I'm surprised to see it come out before, like, the other Sage as well, right? That's just an additional target for it. So, in some ways, yeah, that was a suboptimal Commander's Horn, but in terms of the timing of the round, it was enough to give him the pass. And when Northern Realms is getting down to their very important core, like you very accurately touched on, he needs to mulligan Reinforcement. He's not going to play Reinforcement because that's what John Natalis is going to play. So when he's getting down to a very important core, irohabit can't afford to spend much more, and so TailBot can do slightly suboptimal plays if it gives him the pass.
Exactly. We do see still more Magnum Ales in hand here for TailBot. He can just keep on spamming those. Obviously, we don't see an answer from irohabit. We don't see a Scorch. So these units are going to get very big, and they're not going to get any kind of punishment, which is great for TailBot, I think, because this is normally really risky. If you play into an Igni or a Scorch,
Understand this message.
Igni or Scorch, 25 points plus of value, which is absolutely terrible, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Whenever I do this is usually when my opponent has 3 Witch Hunters in hand. But yeah, TailBot is getting away with it magnificently, and we're seeing the tempo do extremely well. We got Scorch on screen just to remind you what it does. The card we're referencing destroys all the highest units, which, as you can imagine, would be quite bad for TailBot right now. But thankfully, irohabit is not in possession of a Scorch.
We do see some pretty suboptimal cards in hand here for TailBot. The Thunder, like you said before, not fantastic. It's going to be worth very few points, just the 7 from that Thunder. Doesn't really synergize with anything much, other than Protectors, of course, that does buff them by 1 point for the round 3 finish. But it's interesting here. I mean, it's going to be hard to call, really. I mean, we only see the Protectors from hand. They're not that large, because we didn't see a Quen, for example, that boosts them all by 2, plus the Protection, of course. So it's odd that we didn't see Ithling come out, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm slightly surprised at the lack of Ithling play as well, but I think in terms of closing the gap, it was fairly important, and we see Dunbanner Light Cavalries on the screen here, which are a card that you saw in a previous match where if you go, I believe it's over, well, it is, over 20 points behind. At the start of your turn, they come flying out to the rescue. irohabit doesn't actually run those, because he runs Dunbanner Heavy Cavalries, which may have been the card that meant to show.
Which TailBot might not have to play around that in this case, because he knows that. But of course, he can't know that. His opponent, we've been seeing it all day long, he can't really know if he's playing the Light Cavalries or not. So you always have to keep it in mind when you're playing against an Northern Realms player to know to play around those cards, because obviously they can surprise you if they come out of nowhere when you're 20 points up.
They certainly can, and you'll find most high-level players watching the deck size especially. Like, if you see a bigger than 25 Northern Realms deck, there's a high chance the Dunbanner Lights are hiding in there, so make sure you always play around that. But we do see the round continuing in really high tempo for both players. Look at this, 117, I was going to go up in a minute, but 117 to 116. Such a crazy round too. We're seeing so many points come out.
And irohabit really taking a big risk here. He's bleeding a lot. He has a Dead Natalis from what I make out of his deck, and he also has only 4 cards left in his deck. He used big finishers like Dijkstra and Shawnee in this round as well. I'm not sure if he's going for the 2-0 or not, but we still see some big plays from TailBot with that Ithni, plus that first light, which will probably draw either a Sage or a Protector, which is going to be a big point swing regardless. So I'm not sure if irohabit's strategy is going to work, considering he's still 2 cards behind and only a few points up ahead.
Yeah, I think that this is a very risky play. I mean, realistically, he's only well, he's got reinforcement, but that completely bricks the John Natalis. So Radovid is the only particularly convenient high source of power. He could drop Natalis as a delaying play and just play a vanilla reinforcement next round. That's an option. It depends on how much he varies the extra card. But as TailBot's already ahead and keeping ahead on points, irohabit is playing a very dangerous game right now.
Yeah, and John Natalis does pull out a silver or bronze tactics card from your deck, but of course I think there are none left. We did see many of those played already. We saw the reinforcement, the Commander's Horn, for example, that was stolen by the Iglace, and we see Ithni playing Commander's Horn again for a big point swing, replaying that spell card, and it makes it so irohabit is now pretty much guaranteed to be a card down for round 3. I don't think he can pull it back with the cards he has left in hand.
No, absolutely. He does have the option of playing Radovid if he does want to briefly take the lead again and force another card, but right now, honestly, it would be such a close gap that TailBot would just close it with Alza's Thunder, right? He just immediately Alzas it. So we see the pass coming out from irohabit, going 1 card down into round 3 against a Spell Scoia'tael. I gotta say, from where I'm sitting, TailBot's looking in a pretty great position.
Yeah, being card up and being able to save, I think he played none of his protectors is pretty fantastic. The Quen here coming a bit late, he can just pull the Thunder back into his deck and use that as well as an Ifling target and play 2 Thunders for a 16-point Ifling, which is pretty fantastic with a synergy with the protectors as well. It makes it so, I mean, I think being a card up is going to be the most important thing here.
Yeah, this is actually a wonderful matchup for TailBot because honestly that muzzle just isn't going to see value, right? Maximum potential value is what, a 4-point Sage? Not particularly going to do too much. And then we have Natalis going in for a reinforcement, which really, at this point, is irohabit's biggest play.
And it might just pull Redanian Elite here to get some synergy for the Heavy Cavalry, or it can pull Stennis as well, of course, if he still has it in deck, plus Margarita.
Oh, he's going to have wished he saved that for later, because Margarita, in addition to locking its target, will also reset it. So not having that against those Dolphin Protectors is going to hurt. Irohabit shakes his head. He knows that was not the time for Margarita to come out.
There really wasn't any other play he could have made there, though. I mean, the muzzle onto an Elven Mercenary, not fantastic. It's a 2-point gold card. Dumb Banana Heavy Cavalry, there's no chance that it can really hit anything because there's no armor on the board. And of course, Radovid couldn't really lock anything. So he was, in a tough spot. I think he had to play out Stennis and hope for the best.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, by removing the armor, he's opened up Owl's Thunder to be doubled up by Ifleen. Ifleen, of course, copying a bronze spell and playing the original version of it in your deck as well. So really, really scary card here, just for huge points value. And I simply just don't think we're going to see Irohabit have the points to compete in this round.
Yeah, it was really unfortunate. I mean, he went a card down going to round 3. Maybe he misplayed round 2 a bit where he went too far in. It's really hard to really, dictate round 2 and decide when to bleed Spelltail because, like I said before, they have answers for any kind of round length, I think, for the most part, especially with Farseers, but also with the Sage deck because if there is no answer, there's no Scorch, there's no Igni, the Sages go unpunished and they can really rack up a lot of points.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to see these Dolphin Protectors come out over 20 points each, which, we like to talk about average point per card. Well, that's a pretty high average point per card. Muzzle is going to have a sad little 1-point target to steal. And the first game of the series is going to TailBot, or will be going to TailBot, even if I could learn to speak English. So TailBot takes the first game 1-0 to him, and actually a really strong start.
Yeah, really crushing defeat here, I think. I think Irohabit's going to really have to, check himself mentally, make sure this doesn't really affect him too much. There are a lot more games to play, and I think he can really bounce back and try his best and really get back into this series and try and defeat TailBot as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we see TailBot using his very, unique to the tournament at least, Spellscoitel deck, making use of that Mahakamail, pouring pints everywhere and taking the win, which is a really, really strong opener for him, as he has 2 more, what I would say, traditional tournament decks available to him in Radovid and Bran. So TailBot will be pretty happy with that win. Irohabit's got to wipe the slate clean and start over. But it'll be interesting to see if he stays on that Radovid or not, because honestly, that Radovid deck looked pretty great. I just think he lacked the answers necessary.
Yeah, exactly. I think not having the Scorch or the Igni, which most decks normally have an answer to these decks that, pull these very high strength units for round 3. They normally have an answer like Coral, for example, or Scorch or Igni. In this case, Irohabit had none of that. He had his own amount of point generation, but nothing to counter his opponent.
So let's head into the second game and see if he can come up with some answers this time. It is going to be Northern Realms versus Monsters, the Unseen Elder going up against Radovid.
We do see Irohabit bringing a new deck here with the Unseen Elder, and we do see Necker Warriors, so he's going to go for a Necker spam strategy where you create so many Neckers in the back of your deck that there's really no end to them.
Absolutely. We do see the classic Monster Mulligan, Roach in hand. Not something you want. We will see Roach being put back into the deck, and a Harpy in hand. Alright, saved it next. Slizzard replacing the Harpy. Almost did the high roll. Gone wrong, but thankfully not in this case.
Yeah, Monsters definitely has some risky mulligans with, pretty much every single archetype has those cards that you never want to see in hand round 1. I think for the most part, they were able to salvage both their mulligans and have, some decent cards. We see Shadow as well, a great card for pulling Neckers from the deck.
Yeah, really awesome to see Shadow seeing play, which is quite the tongue twister in this game, because Shadow will play, it's just a great little card. Plays a little Death Wish unit, great shooter. Very, very cool silver, actually. I remember when this card was added to the game, everybody looked at it and just went, that'll probably be good when Death Wish is good. And hey, we have Death Wish units which are good now. So Shadow all of a sudden seeing play in the competitive setting, which is awesome. I think this tournament's actually been fantastic for variants. And speaking of variants, one thing I do want to point out, Han Marvin's Blue Dream in TailBot's hand. What do you make of this card?
It's a card that might seem a bit memey to some viewers because it has a lot of risk. It's kind of like part of what Renew used to do before the switch, where you can access your opponent's graveyard. Although it does pull a copy now, so it can't steal gold cards directly. But it's really, really good with Dijkstra, because Dijkstra is a disloyal unit, and once it dies, it goes to your opponent's graveyard. It's kind of like Iris, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. Hand Marvin's Blue Dream could actually be seeing legitimate play. It's slightly theoretical in its application. You do need to get the Dijkstra out reliably, but Northern Realms is an excellent deck when it comes to thinning, and it's more than likely that we may well see a double Dijkstra Dream, which is a tough thing to do, but I really, really, for all of our sakes, hope we get to see Hand Marvin's Blue Dream come in big here.
I mean, you can always use it in a more normal fashion and just steal a muzzle, for example, that goes straight to the graveyard once used. So because it's not a unit, it also, it's much easier to steal spells, and obviously muzzle is a card that we've been seeing a lot in the current meta. So having a muzzle pretty much through that Blue Dream is also a fantastic option as well.
Yeah, it's really great, honestly, even with Gels. Like, Monsters actually has a great matchup for Hand Marvin's Blue Dream because you get cards like Caretaker, Woodland Spirit, Gels, Muzzle. There's all sorts of fantastic stuff that you can steal when playing Hand Marvin. So yeah, it's a really great card to see. I'm really happy to see it seeing play in a competitive setting, and I'm very excited to see how it does.
We see irohabit here opening with a shadow straight into the Necker. Obviously, that Necker is the only one he didn't have any in hand, so it was kind of risky because if you don't have a second copy, if that is muzzled, for example, and you don't have a second copy to pull out and use the Necker Warriors on, it can always get a bit risky because your game plan is pretty much ruined. But in this case, irohabit had a fairly good opening, and he was able to use that Vran right away and start getting this Necker chain going with the Necker Warriors as well.
I mean, the super interesting thing here is if irohabit actually does play his muzzle, it's a dream for TailBot, right? Because he just steals the Necker. If there's no alternative Necker source coming out, that also works, although Slizzard will deal with that shortly. He can steal the Necker with muzzle and really shut down irohabit's play.
Exactly. I mean, it's muzzle is a card that not only does it, like we said before, it's standard value, can also take away utility, but it also kind of serves like a lock on units like the Necker. It doesn't make it as high tempo because Necker's obviously a bit, on the lower side in terms of stats when you steal it most of the time, but it does serve as a lock where your opponent won't draw that Necker from his graveyard, for example, because it is not dying. It's not going to the graveyard. It doesn't trigger to the death wish at all.
Yeah, we see Slizzard here. Slizzard is probably, I would say, the most important card that was added recently for a certain faction. Monsters has just found new life with this card at its disposal, able to counteract things that previously would have meant doom, like Radovid locking your Necker and killing it. Slizzard provides an alternative way to deal with these things, and honestly, all around, just an extremely important card.
We do see TailBot with the option to pass here and go 2 cards up. It's obviously a very risky thing to do against a deck like Consume, because if you give it control of round 2 and let it dictate the pace of round 2 and the way carryover works, it can, spell quite a nightmare for the player that's facing that because he can't really control the Neckers unless you have, a card like Margarita in hand, for example.
Oh, what do you make of this? Torrential Rain, not an option you often see coming out of Death Mold, but in what he suspects to be a long round, could potentially see some pretty awesome value.
Yeah, exactly. I think he's just really, TailBot is dictating that he's going to go for a long round. He's letting irohabit know that he's going to, go for the long one, try and, bleed out his consume tools here and maybe not let him, and definitely try and win this round, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I do like the amount of answers that TailBot has here to consume. Even that Margarita is sitting there looking excitedly at that Necker, thinking, my time's going to come and I'm gonna clutch this for you, TailBot. I got this. So I think that TailBot actually has a pretty great deck when it comes to dealing with this, especially as Monsters even plays a lot of mid-range strength units, and he's even got Ballistas sitting there.
Exactly. We see a lot of control from TailBot's side as well. Obviously, it's control that has a lot of value as well because of this crewman synergy. We saw Ronvid as well in the deck, so we definitely know that he's going for a big crewman synergy and also thinning here. It's kind of a mix between the Hensel decks we normally see with control and the Radovid decks that like to thin a lot and create a lot of value. But it's going to be interesting to see how he melds both of these archetypes together.
Yeah, it's actually a really fascinating hybrid deck now that you talk about it. You have traditional Foltest sort of muster and thinning, like the Blue Stripe Scouts and the Reaver Scouts working in conjunction with them. And then we have this like control-y side, and then we have this machine side, and then you got Hand Marvin's Blue Dream. Like, it's a pretty cool little hybrid mashup we're seeing here take on this Consume deck.
And I think one of the biggest cards in Consume as well, not only the Neckers, but also the Vrans. We mentioned this before when we first saw Consume in the tournament, but the Vrans, not only do they pull out Neckers, they also, increase and boost the Neckers every single turn that they're consuming, which over a long round, you might, think it's not going to be so many points, but over a very long round, especially with multiple Vrans on board, it adds up to quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really, really important engine card. We like the term engine card here because it's exactly what they are. They drive the entire deck forward, but we do see battering rams starting to come down and do major damage sat in between those two crewmen.
Yeah, we do see obviously the rain still ticking. It's even more and more weather and more points every single turn that irohabit wants to stay in this.
Yeah, and there's Hand Marvin's Meme Dream itself, spawning a copy of a gold card from your opponent's graveyard. And if it's a unit boosted by 2, it's like Necromancy and Royal Decree rolled into 1. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a great combination. It's important to note, though, that it does make a copy, doesn't steal the unit itself. A few patches ago, obviously, stealing Hjalmars and renewing them was a big strategy, but in this case, it will only do a copy, not...
Oh my goodness. You just reminded me about all of that shenanigans of the Hjalmar, so yeah, that was fun. But yes, it does not steal the card, that is true. It does just make a copy, but still, when it comes to cards such as Muzzle and stuff, it gives you great utility, which we'll probably see here, to be fair. But yeah, I really like TailBot's position in this game. He's found himself one card up, he's ahead. He doesn't really care too much about card advantage. You know, to quote the famous cards don't matter. He doesn't care too much about it right now because essentially this is against Consume, right? You just don't want them to win round one. You want this round one so you can dictate the pace of the game.
Exactly. And Margarita here not only locks but also resets the unit, which is great against, you know, Vrans and Neckers. I think it does a great job against both because both of these units are boosted, and obviously that they would reset down to their base strength, which is, you know, a huge point swing and also a great utility as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the Siege Masters is going to keep rolling on that battering ram. Doesn't need to put it next to it because it's already between two crewmen, and he's just going to bleed the Neckers out of the deck, which is a smart play, to be honest. The more that you can deplenish those, keep them down to those really low base strengths, the better.
Yeah, obviously one way to deal with Neckers is to lock them. If you lock them now, though, there's some, you know, obviously you're going to see Slizzards. There's going to be ways for irohabit to draw more from his deck, and then you'll have even more carryover for round 2. And those Neckers will grow with Unseen Elder and, you know, different consume mechanics in his deck. But obviously, if you're able to just ping them all off when they're very low, it makes it so the new ones come out and you don't have to deal with them later on. So it's also an efficient way to deal with them.
For sure, and I've got to say, I'm really liking how TailBot is playing this game so far. Actually, very impressed by him so far as a player because he is letting the points stack up on that Vran because that Margarita all of a sudden is representing 18 points on her own. She's got a huge power swing there. So he's leaving all the options open. This is ignoring the fact that he's sitting with like a double ballista, well, a triple ballista shot even. Commander's Horn, reinforcement. He's got so many answers. I actually really like, again, his position in this game.
Exactly. He has both the best of both worlds. He has both the utility with the Margarita and the lock, which is, you know, fantastic, and also the tempo from the cards he has there. Karen, another card that has a lot of tempo. It not only acts as a consume trigger for the Neckers, but it also creates a big tempo swing when it consumes a unit that's at 6 strength, like that Radovid.
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing here is with that rain dealing random damage, right? It's gonna, well, not random, but it's gonna hit the Gels. And that Gels is gonna be Han Marvin's Blue Dreamable. I just want to see the meme dream in action. Like, somebody's brought Han Marvins to a tournament. I just want to get to the point where we play Han Marvins because I'm so excited to see this card in action.
Yeah, it's going to happen sooner or later. I think it's going to be great to see, you know, what it can pull and what it can really do. The muzzle would be fantastic here as well. I mean, he has a lot of options, and also Dijkstra. You know, playing 2 Dijkstras is kind of the dream, I think, for any Middle Realms player. If he can pull it off, that would be great to see as well, just for the viewers too. So we're hoping for that, maybe.
Yeah, he is seriously diluting the targets with those eggs, though. However, those Harpy eggs are just going to make that Margarita hit even harder. The more of those eggs that Vran consumes, its base strength rockets, not its base strength, its boosted strength rockets up. And that Margarita finds more and more value. And honestly, I can see this Margarita sealing this round out.
The Unseen Elder would be a good counter to that, though. By consuming that Vran, it would make it base strength, and Margarita wouldn't be able to lock it, or, you know, boost, you know, remove that boosted strength, basically. So I think irohabit maybe might be expecting it. I mean, Margarita is not a card we've been seeing in the meta too much recently, so maybe it's a card that, you know, flew under his radar, doesn't expect it at all, and maybe just doesn't react to it at all.
Doesn't care. He just takes it out with the ballista. He says, nice Necker, nice eggs, we'll get rid of that anyway. So we see the eggs denied, although of course Unseen Elder can still consume the Vran for a pretty high base point swing, but I'm liking TailBot's position right now. I think Commander's Horn, huge source of tempo. Of course, he will be completely paranoid of the Igni when he does play it, but it's not there, so he'll be fine. And yeah, what do you think? Like, how do you think that the consume player is doing so far?
I mean, he's doing fine. He has the Neckers, but obviously a lot of Neckers have been cycled out already, so he doesn't really have that many left in his deck for the further rounds and to use as carryover. Obviously, you want to use Unseen Elder to consume a Necker as well, then have even more for round 2 and 3. But in this case, I think TailBot did a really good job of cycling those Neckers out just through sheer damage. And in the end there, I think this is not going to be the greatest play, I think, just pulling all the Neckers out.
Yeah, absolutely. We see Unseen Elder coming down, some very interesting choices going. He's just eating the lower strength Harpy younglings, I believe they're called, the Harpy hatchlings, and just to boost that Necker up. And then he eats the Necker, which leaves it open for Margarita to lock the Vran for a huge reset.
Or you can just lock this last Necker depending on the Neckers that are left.
Are there any remaining? So we were talking about Caster's Nightmares, right? Counting Neckers is its own sort of arithmetic, so I think he must be on 1 or 0, right?
I think TailBot should be more worried than us, really. This is his game to lose if there are more Neckers left. I think the play is really important here. I'm pretty sure there was at least one more Necker left, or else TailBot wouldn't have locked it, and I think TailBot's a fairly smart player, so I guess we can trust him, I think. In the end here, I think the rain ticking, obviously, it wasn't enough here, but because we did see that Fiend coming out, unlocking that Necker as well, so it's a good counter to the Margarita, too. We do see Commander's Horn here, just, you know, being able to create a ton of tempo, and I think it'll edge TailBot ahead here.
There we go. So TailBot is going to be taking this first round. I don't believe there's any target big enough. No, of course there's not. It can max out at 16. So TailBot takes the first round, a very, very crucial round to take against Consume. And when you set Consume on this few cards and they don't have that round win in their pocket, they're in serious trouble.
Yeah, TailBot does not play a Spy, so we can't really catch back up in card advantage, but I think that was the last Necker from irohabit, so it means that there isn't much carryover for round 3. So in the end, now both players are down to pretty much their last cards to be used as finishers for round 3. And we see some infantrymen there for TailBot to save for round 3 maybe.
That's really, really nice for him to have right now because he can keep it in hand. If he draws another round 3, he just mulligans it. It's super, super good for him to just know that he has that finisher reliably in the bank. But he mulligans it.
Or he might decide to mulligan it and think to maybe draw it with the card like Dijkstra, trying to maximize his chances to draw that Dijkstra and use that as a finisher round 3 as well. In the end, I think he has a very high chance to draw either Dijkstra or the infantryman back as well in round 3, so he wasn't too worried about that, I think.
Here we go. We were talking about counting Neckers. That's what TailBot's trying to do right now, figuring out if he can go for the dry pass. I think he's clocked it. I believe that is the last Necker available to irohabit, and TailBot can well, he can afford the dry pass because in terms of points per card, he certainly will be winning on equal.
Exactly. Even if it isn't the last Necker, you really want to pass immediately to make that Necker strength in round 3 not matter as much because you have more cards. If you would try and bleed here, I think he wouldn't get too much done, considering that he's obviously going to go into a round 3 where there's a 10 strength Necker carryover.
There's one more Necker. That is significant carryover when you're on this few cards, so there we go. I was incorrect. There was a Necker remaining. We see Regis Higher Vampire. We're seeing all the rare cards come out this time. This is brilliant. Han Marvin's Blue Dream versus Regis Higher Vampire. Who's going to take it? We're going to find out. If TailBot wins this, he will go up to 2-0. And then only require one more win to stake his claim, which is tomorrow's semi-finals.
We do see fairly strong hands in both players, fairly strong cards in both players' hands, so I think it's tough to judge right now. Doragray and Regis are great cards. I think there are no more Neckers left, but I think that was the last of them, so they can't really synergize too much with that. And Rombit, of course, in round 3 is going to have that battering ram synergy, but not so much. I mean, for a silver card, you can maybe expect a little bit more value. In round 3, it's still going to be decent, though. I think the big thing is really the Dijkstra, if you can pull the infantryman out and create a huge tempo gap.
Yeah, I think the Dijkstra is very, very important here. I don't believe he has a way to kill it unless he gets lucky with its draws, and so he can hand Marvin's it. So it's going to come down to a little bit of luck. You know, even if it just takes a little bit of damage, he can finish it off with that other battering ram. So I like both players' hands here. I think you're right. I think we're in for a pretty cracking final round.
We do only see, I mean, we see 7 cards left in TailBot's deck, so I think he could pull off the double Dijkstra, although we do have to take into account how many thinning cards he has. We know he has 3 infantrymen, so it's really only 5 cards left in his deck, and 2 Dijkstras would pull out 4, so if he has any extra synergy or thinning cards, it would be a bit of a nightmare to use 2 Dijkstras because it wouldn't get max value.
There we go, but we're seeing a round 3 10 strength Ronvid. One of the few times that Ronvid has survived to be 10 base strength in round 3.
Yeah, it's not the most common thing at all.
Yeah, so we're going to see, I would imagine we'll see Dijkstra pretty soon. Ronvid's there so the battering ram gets its extra damage. He's got a nice little base strength as well himself, so it's all going to come down. I mean, you know, I hate saying it, but it is going to come down a little bit to luck of the draw when this Dijkstra is played.
I think it's the norm with Dijkstra, really. I mean, it's a card that it has that RNG element that players and viewers love, but it also has the RNG element that sometimes loses you games if you draw the wrong cards, or at least, you know, the wrong cards in the wrong order, for example.
Yeah, I think it's actually pretty healthy RNG, though. Slight tangent, but I think it's pretty healthy because, of course, it is just playing what's in your deck, right? It's not dealing 1 to 4 damage, you know. It's nice. I actually like Dijkstra as a card. I think it's the sort of high rolling that is acceptable and pretty enjoyable.
Exactly. And we do see the Vran in the range, though, which clearly indicates there are no more Neckers left because we would be seeing the Vran cycle the Neckers otherwise. But yeah, I think there are no more Neckers left. I think it's pretty safe to say
Finally, we can say there's no more Neckers left.
I'd be surprised if there were any. I think irohabit would have had to play maybe 5 Necker Warriors to have that happen. In the end here, though, I think it's going to come down to Dijkstra. I mean, this infantrymen, if they come out, if you can get the synergy with a Marvin's Blue Dream, it'll be a huge swing. Otherwise, you can just see a Gills maybe as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great backup, right? Like, Gills is not exactly a bad backup for that Han Marvin, so I think TailBot is weighing up his odds. I think we will see the Dijkstra pretty imminently, though. Although, no, the Gills, he can line Dijkstra up, right? He can just get whatever he wants on top of his deck.
Yeah, that's true. You can get the silver cards as well, so or just, yeah, he has a marching order, which is going to be fantastic as well. I think that does pull out the infantrymen, so I think he really can't complain about this.
Yeah, who knew Gills was such a great Northern Realms card, coming out to reset that Necker and lining up the marching orders for... What will the marching orders be in his deck? Let me have a quick look.
I'm pretty sure it would be infantrymen in this case.
I think it would be. I think you're right, actually, yeah. There you go. So that's going to guarantee the large tempo swing coming off of DJ Extra himself. And now, with that 3-strength Necker back on the board, all of a sudden, Battering Ram has a target to kill if it's put down next to Ronvid.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this case, muzzle, it's going to get, it's almost max value. It's going to be 12 value, which is decent. Dorgray going to be also decent, but I think if Dijkstra is able to perform, obviously with marching orders and infantrymen, it definitely would. It would be a big, big point swing. I think TailBot has this one.
Yeah, I like TailBot's advantage right now. I think it's very, very strong. There's not a target for this Dorgray. It's not really going to be doing too much. And the muzzle, while it'll find a little bit of value, probably going to get 12 or 14 off of either Margarita or the battering ram. It's simply not going to be enough. Well, it'll now get 16 off the Ronvid and deny the crewman. So actually a nice little muzzle setup from irohabit, but it's not going to be enough.
Well, the crewman, I mean, if he plays battering ram now, he can still get that crewman tag, at least for this battering ram, but not from the Dijkstra pulls, of course. And it'll make Dijkstra a card that can really, it's going to be the last thing in the game, which is also fantastic, I think. But like you said, good synergy with Dorgray to play the Drowner and get that 8-point target for the muzzle as well. But in the end, the Dijkstra, I think, might be just too much for irohabit to deal with.
Yeah, although we have seen marvelous Dijkstra backfires in both the recent and the far past, so always a little bit dangerous to call it this early, but you got to look at the cards on the board and read it realistically, and it does look like Dijkstra is going to be finding enough value to bring this home.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a standard 16-point swing. It's going to put, only needing 12 points to win it here for TailBot. I think Dijkstra can definitely manage that.
Yeah, he needs to pull 17, so it's infantry and literally any points, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Any kind of infantryman is going to win it here. So I think TailBot has this one. He's going to, go 2-0 up. We do see the ballista coming out instead. So it was a tie there, but they were both 6-strength units. The last ballista does come out, and we do see the infantryman though at the very end. So like we said, I mean, it's a clear win here for TailBot. We do see consume from the Regis though, which did eliminate one of the infantrymen.
There we go. Yeah, I was just briefly. Why is there only 2? Regis High Vampire, of course. Not often you see that card in competitive play. Pretty awesome to see. So TailBot going 2-0 up. He only requires to win with his brand deck to get his place in tomorrow's semi-finals. Really, I've got to say, both players are playing well, but I'm really impressed with TailBot's play so far.
Exactly, and TailBot has pretty much, I think, one of the strongest decks in the game right now left because of its great utility. It has the great carryover. It has, great answers for a lot of, round 1 strategies with Coral and with Lugos, and in general, it has just a very consistent deck.
Yeah, I think that he's got if there's, if you've got 3 games in which to win one and there's any deck in the game to have, you're probably going to be looking towards either Nilfgaard Spies or King Bran, right? And we do hear King Bran inviting you to drink at his table, and we're going into the mirror match.
It's going to be interesting to see. I mean, both these players have, I think, fairly similar decks. When it comes to King Bran, I think it's fairly standard. Most of the decks right now, they don't vary too much, although we do see some interesting tech choices.
I believe one of the really important tech choices is irohabit runs Gold Weather in his Bran, I think.
Yeah, he is running a Ragnarok, but he's also running Wolfsbane, which is a card that was recently added in the most recent patch that is a brand target, and it makes it so that after 3 turns, it deals 6 damage to the highest unit, and it boosts your lowest unit by 6. So it's kind of like a delayed effect from King Bran, and it makes it very, very strong round 1.
Yeah, certainly some interesting cards coming out from both regards. I mean, Wolfsbane, Golden Weather, but then TailBot has the Grimace to answer. We see only muzzle being played by TailBot, so we won't see a double muzzle, which I'm somewhat relieved to say, and we do see Grimace in hand, so if that Ragnarok goes down, it could just get nullified.
Exactly. Ragnarok and Skellige, I think, is a kind of a surprise factor where similar to cards like Burner Brand and Skellige or White Frost and Rolling Realms, where players don't really expect Golden Weather or just big weather in general, so they maybe use that Grimace early on to get some points off maybe instead of using it to weather clear, and that can spell a lot of trouble for TailBot.
Yeah, there's some really interesting opening hands from both players here though. Triple Priestess in both hands. A little bit early for that, I'd say, but we see the classic discard. There's Wolfsbane and Morkvarg going into the graveyards. And Cirrus, of course, too.
Yeah, Wolfsbane is a card that you haven't seen at all this tournament yet. I think it's quite strong in discard lists where you have that open slot with King Bran, and it can add some delayed tempo swing later on that can be kind of tricky for the opponent as well if he's not familiar with the card. I think irohabit and TailBot both know the card very well though. They play a lot of games on Pro Ladder. They've grinded a lot to be here. I think they're both pretty familiar with all the gold cards in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that TailBot, well, we saw him open the graveyard immediately, right? We know he knows that he's there, so it's an interesting matchup, though. It really does make this quite fascinating because when that Wolfsbane starts hitting the Morkvarg in round 2 and stuff, you can get some very strong carryover situations. And this one really does come down to a lot of it is turn advantage. There's no point denying it. irohabit is certainly in the advantageous position because in the Skellige matchup, maybe out of all matchups, actually, the coin flip is most impactful in the mirror. So irohabit is certainly playing from a position of advantage. What I'm very interested to see is when do we see this Gold Weather committed, and does TailBot see it coming?
I think TailBot might have to be careful to know when to pass as well. If maybe he thinks Wolfsbane is too big of a swing, he might have to pass early on instead of later, and maybe have get punished by that Ragnarok as well in round 2 for the long round 2 if irohabit wants to bleed, for example. So it's going to be interesting to see if TailBot decides to pass at any point sooner, just plays very high tempo to try and counteract that Wolfsbane tempo swing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think like so much of it's going to come down to how you play around the Wolfsbane, because it's a card that can certainly be played around, and for TailBot's sake, he needs to have a little bit of foresight and maybe hold on to that Gremist, because if that, imagine he were to copy irohabit's play, right? If he played Gremist for a Blood-Curdling Roar, and then Ragnarok was played, it would just be the end of this round for him.
It's very possible that irohabit is trying to get a bit of a mind game going with TailBot also by playing that Gremist, and in mirrors many times you try and unconsciously imitate your opponent's play sometimes, and maybe go and do the same thing that they did, and that would be absolutely huge because he does have Ragnarok in hand. I think TailBot maybe is going to be wary that obviously we saw people like Matranos playing a lot of gold in the most recent tournament, so I mean I think they know to be careful and try and save those for later on just in case.
Yeah, absolutely, and he almost discarded the Armorsmith there, which would have been huge for when that weather does come out, but instead we just see the traditional discard coming out of the Warmonger for a nice little tempo play. But that's such a good point you raised about like subconsciously imitating your opponent, because when he played that Gremist and Blood-Curdling Roar, it's like, hey, that's a lot of points and it put him ahead. Oh, I've got a Gremist, let's go for it. So it's actually a great point you raised about imitating your opponent there.
And you think about maybe saving cards for later, or trying to match your opponent in terms of tempo for later on, and if you see that come out, you're like, oh, I can use it too because my opponent already used it, and that would obviously punish TailBot quite a bit.
Yeah, we see Heimei Battle Maiden here, a very, very core card in Skellige these days. I think almost every, well, if not every archetype of Skellige is actually running one right now. It's just fantastic at pulling out those additional copies of cards. Really powerful tutor unit. It kind of went in hand with Slizzard in adding tutor effects to factions that were previously lacking them, and it's made a really powerful impact here in Skellige.
Yeah, I think it's just a card that you want to see in every deck. It adds a lot of consistency to pretty much any kind of archetype, because there are a lot of machine and officer tags in the Skellige archetype, all the archetypes basically. We see it here with the Warmongers, with the Harpooners, for example. So it makes it quite easy to get a lot of good targets for Battle Maiden and make it a very good card to include.
Yeah, it's a really great card, and also worth pointing out it has the best premium art in the game. Classic wolf on a stick. But we see a very interesting situation here, right? 30 points apiece. This is where sort of card advantage comes in big, right? irohabit is better off in this scenario because he is playing on the coin flip. But we see the pass from TailBot, very interesting response. Wolfsbane goes off, boom, gives him the round.
And this gives irohabit the round on even cards, which is absolutely huge, and then give him control of round 2 with the Ragnarok as well, or a very long round 3 if he wants. Although we do still see Gremist in TailBot's hand, so he does have the answer for that.
There we go. Surus, however, coming out for TailBot. So irohabit's Surus is on 1 at the moment because he's not playing Olgierd, so he didn't have the double res coming out as carryover. So immediately TailBot 12 points ahead. irohabit's dry pass is somewhat blocked. So it's kind of interesting, right? Like, if he wants to bleed him at all, he's going to have to fairly significantly commit to this round.
Yeah, I think TailBot was aware of the the current state of the carryover. He knew he could pass here and block a dry pass. He knows both players have a spy, but obviously they can't. It would not do much to play on this turn. In the end, I think irohabit might just play a spy, hoping that TailBot doesn't have one, for example, but obviously TailBot can respond to that, and it won't do that much damage, really.
Yeah, so if you're wondering what the random points that came out at the end of that last round is, it was Wolfsbane. Wolfsbane is a card that ticks down while it's in your graveyard from 3, and at the end of its counter, it boosts the lowest ally by 6 and damages the highest enemy by 6. So it's a really cool little tricksy card that Skellige got recently that initially in the patch at least saw a great deal of popularity. So it's cool to see it, well, even though the patch has been so fresh still, it's cool to see it kind of come back in a way for the tournament.
Exactly. We do see a Warmonger here pulling out a Raider, thinning the deck a bit and also bringing out Ceres because it is a rest tick. Obviously, Ceres goes to the graveyard, and after 4 rest ticks, she'll come back to the board, and she can do that multiple times in one game, depending. I mean, obviously, she has to be in the graveyard for the reses to count, the rest ticks, but like we saw here, she was on 1 tick, like you said before, and that Raider does bring her out and, create a huge tempo swing for irohabit.
I'm still just super interested in when this Ragnarok is played, because Gremist, more so than other Silver Mages, is a very common inclusion in Skellige, mostly because of the incredible power of that Blood-Curdling Roar, not only giving you the 11 strength bear, but also then enabling your Resurrects, enabling your Restore, all around just a fantastic utility piece for Skellige to have. But that means that irohabit is pretty much aware that the likelihood is TailBot has a Gremist, right? In his deck at least. So he's going to wait to see it and then drop the Ragnarok, which could be devastating.
And irohabit was hovering over Ulrich here. It's going to be important to see where he places it. If he places it in the back row, it's kind of telling your opponent that he has some kind of weather maybe, because normally you want to place it on the melee row so the harpooners can get more, obviously much more damage by stacking one row and dragging all the units to that front row. If he plays in the back row, it's a big tell that he obviously has that Ragnarok or has some kind of golden weather, and that's how he wants to space out all 3 rows.
Yeah, that's such a vital information, there we go. So you can't get that read. It could be mistaken though, as like, oh, he's just going to well harpooner this down to the melee row, so it takes maximum damage for 4 from the units on the row. But yeah, that is a little bit of a telegraph. Of course, it's very easy for us to say that because we can see the board state right in the hands, but Coral coming out of TailBot's Ulrich is a great draw.
Yeah, Ulrich, of course, discards the card you don't choose instead of bringing it back to your deck like most other spies, which synergizes great with his discard archetype and with a card like Raider, for example.
Yeah, really great to see an Ulrich going well. We've had some pretty problematic spies so far this tournament, but I can't remember which game it was, but there's certainly been goals discarded, which feels bad, man. But right now, we have pretty good spies coming out from both players. TailBot's still ahead, though. Equal cards still. irohabit searching for a way to gain back a little bit of card advantage, but I don't know if he's going to find one.
Yeah, it's going to be really tough here, I think. The fact that TailBot could come into this round with much more carryover and stay ahead, be able to, pretty much match the tempo throughout the round, makes it so that obviously he can go into the next round a card up, which is, fantastic, or just on even cards really, because he did lose on even cards in round 1.
Yeah, it's very interesting what he blood curdling rules here, because theoretically, if he actually ate if he ate the Ulrich on his side of the board, it would have opened up his Scorch to hit the opponent's Ulrich, right? So he would have lost 1 point to then gain 11 later on and open up his Scorch. But it looks like he's pretty committed to Scorch round 3, although in a mirror match, Scorch is such a difficult card to hit.
Because irohabit saw both spies being played already, and he did win on even round 1, he knows that he can just play very low tempo this round because there is no way for TailBot to catch back up in card advantage. There's really no more spies to be played, no summoning circle either, and it makes it so, unless there's a decoy, for example. But it makes it so, yeah, that was a huge play, stealing a Grimace for 8 points.
That was unbelievable. Stealing the restore target, then allowing you to Sigdrift for it, and allowing you to have your own restore. We could be seeing double 8-point Grimace played by TailBot here if he wished. That's crazy.
It will not matter for this turn, but as a round 3 res, it's fantastic. Not only do you have a very good play for yourself, but you steal one from your opponent, which is, absolutely huge.
Yeah, and not only is it huge, it also means that you have the Gremist on the Resurrect and the Gremist in the hand to deal with weather. I mean, the weather comes down right now. He's got a Gremist in hand, so we're just going to see the immediate clear here. And thanks to the Clear Skies buff, decent little bit of tempo as well.
Again, showing why Muzzle is so great, why so many players have brought it to this tournament, why it's a card that it just came out recently, but it's being seeing so much play. It's pretty much, I think, a solid card to be played in this meta. I think pretty much everyone decided that as well. And I mean, we're seeing a lot of it played, and this is pretty much why.
Yeah, Muzzle is certainly the spicy sauce of many people's decks right now. I know we've been laughing at them, but the amount of double Muzzles we've seen was just hilarious to me. 2 in that last series we cast between Game King and JJ. It shows the power of the card, right? When the card's best counter is itself, you know it's a pretty good card. So Muzzle, very, very impactful on today's meta, for sure. But tomorrow, maybe that'll change, because all of a sudden everyone will know everyone else has Muzzle. So we'll see a lot more playing around it, but to an extent, you can't dodge it, right?
And we see irohabit trying to get his Ceres as low as possible, trying to get it to res in round 3 and not have TailBot's Ceres do the same. Obviously, he ate it with Blood Clouding Roar, and it makes it so it's in his graveyard and the rest ticks keep on counting. TailBot not in the same situation.
Okay, so we see Coral coming down for 15 points of value, compressing that Ulrich into a tiny little Jade figurine and setting it to 2 strength. So 15 points on that Coral. Decent little just point-based play.
It does open up a Scorch, though, for irohabit, so maybe not the greatest play for TailBot. He can't really know this. Scorch isn't really the most common card to see. It's such a deck, it's got a deck that has a very tight silver group, I think, with cards like Sigrifa, for example, and also Gremist.
Yeah, and we see a pure delaying action come out of irohabit there, just resing up a Clan and Crate Raider, merely a 5-point res, but it sets up his, it actually sets up his Ceres for next round, and also it gets an additional card out of TailBot, because the gap is close enough that I don't think anybody in the world would pass when the opponent had 5 cards, which is what I mean by playing a delaying action. You can just play cards of any value just to get more out of your opponent.
Exactly, and because we know there are no more spies, this can't get punished. Pretty much playing solo tempo normally can get punished by a spy if you don't know if your opponent runs it or not, but we already saw both Ulrichs come out, so we know. I think irohabit definitely knows that his opponent can't do anything about this. He has to keep on playing, and this is one of the strengths of winning round 1. You dictate how round 2 goes and the pace of it.
Yeah, just completely. I mean, in a mirror match, there's nothing more important, right? You're playing largely very similar decks. Okay, there's a few key differences such as Scorch, but when the cores of your decks remain similar, being able to dictate the pace of the game becomes the next most important thing, right? It's super, super key. So I think bleeding is the correct decision here. Just bleed down to where you're comfortable.
And we see both players just setting up, playing Warmongers, not getting Raiders or any kind of big tempo swings, just getting rid of some cards from their deck, thinning them out, making sure they have, the guaranteed draws for next turn, and making sure they have a very consistent round 3 top deck to make sure they can, win this round or get maximum points in round 3.
Yeah, definitely. But we do see both players still holding very high point cards. We've got a 12-point Scorch open, got a 14-point Lacerate, well 13-point because Morgvarg would res, but that would actually deny the Morgvarg because it would banish when it then died, and it would bring Ceres out this round. So honestly, I'm kind of liking the look of the Lacerate on the melee right here.
Yeah, I think TailBot might notice that soon enough. He might try and go for that as well.
Ceres is on a 2-time.
Ceres is on 2/6 though, so it wouldn't work. But it does take care of 1 point of carryover from that Morgvarg, which could be decider in round 3. I mean, you never know. You could win by a point or lose by a point.
Absolutely, but it looks like we're going to see the Battle Maiden get put up to 8 strength, so again, this is almost just preparation for next round, right? While it gives TailBot good tempo this round, it also sets up that really fierce Battle Maiden res.
Exactly, yeah, I mean, we see, obviously, you can res the 8 strength Remis with Sigdrifa, and then the 8 strength Battle Maiden with the Freya, so you have both of those restore targets ready thanks to that muzzle play early on in this round. I think TailBot really has a lot of control here, and the Scorch might not get as much value next turn.
No, I mean, irohabit is going to have the advantage of TailBot must go first, right? And he's playing a faction that is very much so based around powerful resurrects. So there is a likelihood that we simply see the first powerful card resurrected, and irohabit just scorches. Or I'm wrong, and he just scorches the Alderic right now.
I think he may be, looking back at JJ's game against Game King, he sees that Scorch can be a brick card in round 3. It's a risky card to run. It's not a card that gets you guaranteed value every time because it depends on your opponent's board state. And he says, I'm just going to play this right now. I'm not going to risk it. I have, this, obviously, TailBot still can't pass here. There's still, 3 cards to be played. And it's not that big of a point gap, really. So he decided to play the Scorch here and just not risk it for round 3.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be interested to see how TailBot responds to this, because he is getting down to relatively core cards. Lacerate seems like the obvious choice, because it's not going to find big value in a round 3 when very few units are coming out onto the board. You're probably going to be lucky if you hit like 9. Realistically, you're going to get 6 out of it, right? So I'd expect to see the Lacerate sooner rather than later, and him try to preserve as many of his Resurrects as possible.
Yeah, and the fact that irohabit will have the Ceres coming out, but TailBot will not, I think is going to be a big thing as well for the next round. Although he has the Gremis, the 8-strength Gremis with Sigdrifa, and some big point swings in general, I think it's going to be tricky for TailBot to really get, match that Ceres value coming out just for free, basically, because he couldn't really Blood Curdling Roar his Ceres as well.
Yeah, but instead we see an Armor Smith being resurrected out by one of TailBot's Freyas, which is a curious choice. I think it's simply just to get more points on the board. The Lacerate is pretty high value, but I gotta wonder, what is it? Do you think there's anything he's particularly keeping this Lacerate for?
There is no Iris in TailBot's deck, so that really can't be it, which is the only thing I can think of that would really get killed by a Lacerate and provide, a good enough, combo in round 3 to be worth keeping that Lacerate, because like you said, not going to be many units played in round 3, not going to get too much value on the Lacerate, but other than that, I can't imagine why he would keep it. I think he just knows maybe he's going to mulligan anyway, because he has a fairly consistent amount of cards left, and he knows that they're all going to be, better than Lacerate, so he's just going to mulligan it. But again, kind of weird, he hasn't played Lacerate yet.
Yeah, it's a curious choice. I'm very interested to see his reasoning as to why, but we see irohabit going to, so what that does is, while that only actually does 1 point of value, it will, it'll just remove the Morgvarg for next round from TailBot, and irohabit will still have his. So when it comes to things like impacting Ceres timers and stuff, it is relatively important. So are we finally going to see the Lacerate?
You might be wary of killing this Morgvarg and maybe not getting too owed, but having most of his core cards being played out here if irohabit decides to play the Freya and get Ceres out this turn. So it really depends. We do see a pass here from irohabit, so we're going to go into a very close round 3 where irohabit has a Ceres, TailBot doesn't, but TailBot does have a very beefy Grimace waiting for him in his graveyard.
Yeah, irohabit also has a Coral, which is a huge card here, because you can res something with as big a base strength as you like, but if it gets Coraled, it's going to 2. It's going to 2 strength, so based on these initial hands, edge goes to irohabit, right?
I mean, we're going to have to think so because of that Ceres as well. I mean, Coral's going to be great, but it really isn't going to hit a unit like a Protector, for example, or a Big Necker. There's not really that many boosted units, and in this King Brand variant, there aren't cards like Skirmisher, for example, that grow to huge amounts. In general, the cards are normally going to get maybe 11 max from the Bear, from the Gremis, but other than that, it's not going to be too much higher. So Coral will be decent value, but less than the bigger gold cards like Muzzle, for example, or maybe like Igni.
Yeah, for sure. I think we're going to see some really interesting decision-making come out here. I mean, timings on things such as Coral and stuff can be perfect, right? Because it's like, do I think he's going to res something bigger, or do I need to delay my own Resurrect? So it's going to come very close. I think you're right. I think that Ceres is going to be super key. irohabit has beautifully managed it onto a 1-timer.
And we see Lugos coming in as well. Lugos is huge. I mean, that's really the draw that TailBot wanted. He thinned his deck a lot. He's looking for consistency, and Lugos is the answer to that consistency. It's going to be a huge swing with the Warmonger as well that he mulliganed back into his deck. And it makes it, like we saw there, there's no discards because he wants to have those targets ready for irohabit, obviously.
Yeah, and that is just going to simply give so much value to that Lugos. Huge target removal, and then a big res to follow. But it's going up against the terrifying removal power of a Coral. So really, really close match right now. I gotta lean towards irohabit just because of things like Ceres and stuff. Lugos is gonna be great, but the Ceres value will be significant.
I mean, the 8-point Grimace, though, you can't really forget about that
The
one
8-point Grimace is an 8-point Grimace, that is true.
It is a big swing as well, so I think, I mean, the Lugos is just really, really powerful. If he wouldn't have drawn Lugos, it would have been much, much closer, but TailBot might just steal it here. I mean,
this is a huge play, right?
Exactly. It's going to be quite close. It depends on the Sigrifa draw for irohabit as well. Obviously, that Grimace, not only did it get, TailBot has it for himself, he also stole that res target for irohabit as well. So, I mean, it's a huge swing, really, thanks to that muzzle.
Yeah, he essentially made irohabit's his own restore do work for TailBot, right? Because all of a sudden he gave him the 8-point target for muzzle, and he gets the resurrect here. Going to be going onto a bear, onto that Priestess of Freya. A huge value, putting him up to 30 points, 31 points even, my apologies, which is really, really powerful. He can then coral that for 9, but that's only 14 points. That's not enough to give him the lead. And then it's going to be Lugos versus Sigdrifa. And when that restores target's been stolen, yeah, irohabit could be in trouble.
And Lugos, in most cases, you can use Sigdrifa to maybe res an Armor Smith and res whatever Lugos hits, but Lugos will be killing that Harpooner here. There isn't going to be no chance to really res that or heal that unit because it will die immediately and go straight to the graveyard. So, I mean, TailBot in the end here, I think, is going to have a bigger swing. He's going to have a 14-point swing on this Harpooner, and he's already a point up, so it's a 15-point swing total. Sigdrifa would have to pull a total of 16 points to surpass TailBot's points here, and I think it's not going to be enough, really. Especially with that Grimace stolen, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key point of this match was that muzzle on the Grimace. Brilliant patience from TailBot again, showing some really smart decision making. Waiting, taking the restore target, and just absolutely shredding irohabit's res value. Even the additional Ceres won't be enough to take it, I don't believe.
Yeah, a Harpooner here would be worth 11 points. It's 3 points of damage plus the 8-point body, plus the Sigdrifa is worth 14 points, so it'd be 1 point down.
1 point shy.
And
is
like we said,
about to get 3-0'd by 1 point?
And like we said in round 2, 1 point could matter. That Morkvar carryover in the end is going to be the decider here. So we said you have to be very wary. 1 point can decide games, and in the end we were correct here. TailBot ends up winning this 3-0ing irohabit.
Big side 3-0ing. GG is called. And there we go, we have our first 3-0 after 3 incredibly close series. We get a 3-0. It is going to be a sweep by TailBot onto irohabit. Well played by both players, especially super impressed by TailBot's gameplay. I think he actually made some incredibly clutch decisions that led to this result. Although the games were much closer than the result reads, and good sportsmanship between both players.